think something new under the sun. You can't take back them things you already done. No. You blame things that you do on somebody else. No. But they all see is you need help. But still you try so hard to cover up your games. You try so hard, hoping that one day something gon' change. You waste all of your time covering up your tracks. Spend all your days running away. Now you gotta watch your back, and that's the facts. You spend so much of your life scheming and trying to get over. Got you wondering why you come around. All you get is cold shoulder. Yeah. You try so hard to cover up your games. You try so hard, hoping that one day something gon' change. You try so hard.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to weeks 9 and 10 of my series of training to run a sub-3 marathon at Christchurch in a few weeks' time. In the introduction, you saw me running around South Piha on trails and on the beach there. It's absolutely beautiful out there on an autumn morning. Thoroughly recommend it if you're based out Auckland way. In the past couple of weeks, we've hit peak volume. So I've been running some really long sessions. I've been running a few fast miles, and the total volume has just been very, very high. I think I hit 125 kilometers in my peak week. We're going to be talking through a number of those sessions and seeing the results that we got. This week's key session, though, is VO2max intervals. Now, we're not actually going to be running anywhere near your VO2max in a marathon, so why would you train at this pace? We're going to talk a little bit about the theory and the practice of VO2max intervals in a second. Logging into Strava, we can see the first of my 2 weeks, 45 minutes aerobic. Sensible stuff. 3x3k, we talked about lactate thresholds the other day. That's not a bad session. Now, our strides on a Wednesday, that's gradually extended over the course of my training, and we're now doing 2 hours. That's really quite a serious session. It's like a midweek long run, in effect. So it's not to be sniffed at. This week, 9x800 with warm-up and cool-down at the end. We're going to talk about VO2max intervals in a bit, but let's just have a quick look at this session. So I did it on the waterfront, and you can see the sessions themselves, sort of, pretty brisk stuff at about 3:45-ish per kilometre. So nice, quick, dovetailed by a sensible pace, warm-up and cool down at the end. So all in all, that's a pretty solid session when you end up running, 19 kilometres, so nearly a half marathon when you include the warm-up and cool down towards the end. Towards the end of the week, Friday, nice easy jog. Saturday, 1.5 hours, nice and flat, nice and easy pace. Now on the Sunday, some people from my training group were running the Maraetai half marathon, so I decided to do it not as a race, but as a marathon pace session. So I went and ran 10k warm-up with those guys, and then I ran about a 1:28 half marathon, which I'm pretty pleased with overall. So I ran 125 kilometers this week, so 77 and a bit miles. That was my peak week during the whole of marathon training. So pretty solid stuff. Moving on to the next week. Similar sort of pattern to the week. Aerobic warm-up, some lactate threshold on the Tuesday. Again, 2 hours with 10 strides, big session. Now, I was tired on the Thursday. It hadn't been a particularly great week. I'd not felt terribly well. So I kept it very easy to a nice 30 minutes on the Thursday and 10k on the Friday. There's no point thrashing yourself if you don't think you're going to get the benefit of it. So while I did miss a session here, I don't feel too bad about it, because I went back, I did an hour and a half on the Saturday, and then on Sunday I went and joined my coach's training group down south for the long run. Let's take a look at that. So I started a little bit below marathon pace and warmed into it, and you can see in the middle section I'm throwing down about 4:11 per kilometre pretty consistently. Okay, a couple of places where there's some hills I'm a bit slower, but overall the course of it was not bad, and I ran 35.5 kilometres in 2.5 hours. That works out at 2.5 hours at marathon pace. And actually at the end of this session I was pretty confident that had I needed to carry on, I could have run the full 26.2 within 3 hours time. I did have the advantage that if you switch temperature on, it was a pretty cool day. So typical temperature was about 17-18 degrees. That's a really, really encouraging session just a few weeks out from Christchurch itself. But now let's go on and talk about VO2max intervals. We're looking at my 9x800 metres VO2max intervals. We've got a couple of miles or 3 kilometres warm up. We've got a couple of miles or 3 kilometres cool down. And in the middle, we've got a section of intervals interspersed with some easy running. It's a pretty standard structure. When you start off doing these, you probably want to start off with maybe 600 or 800 metres and do maybe 4 to 6 repetitions. When you get really right into it, probably in marathon training, maybe you want to do 5 or 6 by 1 mile. I don't find mile repeats work for me personally. I don't quite know what it is, so I tend to do half mile repeats. In this case, I've done 9, but you might start off in the final block of a marathon plan and do 8 and work your way up to 10 or perhaps even 12 if you can handle it. The easy sections between each of the intervals is done at about your easy pace, so in my case, slightly quicker than 5 minutes a kilometre. The fast bit should probably average out at maybe your 5k pace. So in my case, my 5 kilometre PB is 18:07, which works out at 3 minutes 38 per kilometre. And as you can see in here, I'm pretty close to that. Those are the practicalities of including VO2max intervals in a session, which you would do maybe once a week. But why bother? I mean, during a marathon, you're not even going to get close to VO2max intensity. So what's the rationale for this? Well, there's 2 good arguments for this, and they're both science-based. The first is that athletes who include short intervals of 2 to 3 minutes of very intense exercise within their training programs, separated by short periods of rest, tend to see improvements in their VO2max, that's the max cell uptake and consumption of oxygen during exercise, and they also see a general improvement in aerobic capacity. This is pretty well understood. The second is to do with training intensity. There was a superb podcast recently on Science of Ultra which described this. I'll include the link in the show notes. It's really, really important. It's great stuff. You absolutely should have a listen. But the argument goes like this. Of the available possible distributions of intensity, so what you do at an easy pace, what you do at a moderate pace, and what you do at a severe pace, what you see is people who exercise probably 80 to 90% of the time in the moderate domain, so marathon pace or less, who do a 10 to 15% in the heavy domain, so let's say lactate threshold, and do a few percent very heavy right in the severe domain, so 10k race pace, 5k race pace kind of speed, see the best improvements and the best results in their race times. And there's some pretty good evidence for this. And as I say, go listen to the Science of Ultra podcast. It describes that in a level of detail and clarity that I am not able to achieve. I hope your training is going really, really well. We're just a few weeks out from Christchurch now. Things are looking hopeful. Good luck with your training, and please don't hesitate to stick any comments or questions below.